Have you wanted to try cutting cardstock with your Silhouette machine but you weren't quite sure where to start? If so, this is the video for you. Hello and welcome to Craft with Sarah. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use your Silhouette machine to cut sheets of cardstock. We're going to be making this cute little heart design. It's got 3 separate colours in it and it cuts beautifully, and it's a great project to make to learn how to cut cardstock for the first time. In this video, I'll show you how you can unzip download folders to get the files ready to be uploaded, how to put them into Silhouette Studio, how to change the colours in case you'd like to make it in different colours to what it loads in at, how to change the size, and how to get everything cut from cardstock on your Silhouette. And then at the end, we'll take a little look at how to stick it all together, including how to get a lovely dimension between each of the layers. If you're using a different brand of cutting machine, perhaps you have a Cricut or a Scan & Cut, then head to craftwithsarah.com/help. Choose your type of machine from the list on the screen, and then there's a separate version of this same video for you, but one that walks through all the steps for your particular brand of machine. But if you're using a Silhouette, you're in the right place, so let's get started. The first part of this video is the same no matter what type of cutting machine you're using. Once you've chosen the file that you want to make and you've downloaded it, whether it's from craftwithsarah.com or another source, you'll probably find that it comes as a zip folder. You'll need to unzip this or uncompress it before you can upload the cut file into your cutting machine's software. The instructions for doing that are a little bit different if you're on a Windows computer, a Mac, or a mobile device. On a Mac, you can usually just double-click on the zip folder to unzip it. I'll show you how to do it on a Windows computer, which is what I'm using shortly. If you're using a mobile device, whether it's Android or iOS, head to craftwithsarah.com/help, and on that page is a link to a more detailed video and tutorial on how to unzip folders on all those different types of devices. If you're on a Windows computer, find your zip folder. It will probably be in your Downloads folder. Right-click on it and press Extract All. Choose where you want to save it on your computer and then press Extract. You can see that's made a copy of the folder, only this time it doesn't have the zip on the picture. It's showing an open folder and it doesn't end .zip in the file name. So this is the one I want to use when I'm getting the file into my cutting machine software. Now that you've downloaded and unzipped your design, it's time to get the SVG file into Silhouette Studio. Now, one thing to note is that if you're using the free version of Silhouette Studio, known as Basic Edition or Standard Edition, then you cannot open SVG files. The software doesn't let you. What you'll need to load instead are the DXF version of the files. For my files, those are the ones that start DXF in the file name. I have a whole separate video on how to use those files, which I recommend watching if you're new to your Silhouette machine. To find it, go to craftwithsarah.com/help. Choose Silhouette from the list of machine options, and then watch the video that is on the page, and that one is on how to upload files into Silhouette Studio. For this video, I'm going to use the Designer edition of Silhouette Studio, which is the next level up from the free one. So this is a paid version, which means I can use the SVG files. If you're using the free version, don't worry, you can still follow along. It's just you'll first need to follow the steps in that other video to get your file loaded and to add in all the colours. Because when you load DXF files in the free version of Silhouette Studio, it loads in everything in one colour. So you would need to add that in manually. But don't worry, that is shown how to do start to finish in that other video. But if you're using the Designer edition or higher, this is how you do it with the SVG files. Go into File and then Open. Find your unzipped version of the folder. If you're using one of my newer files, then you'll see all of these different numbers. The ones that I recommend for Silhouette Studio is the ones in 0 layers stacked. If you're using one of my older files and you don't see all these folders, you just see the files directly in all the same place, choose the file that starts SVG in the file name. Alright, so I'm going to go into the 02 layer stacked and then choose the SVG file, which again is the one that starts SVG in the file name. I'll open that, and this is how it's loaded in. It's zoomed in quite a long way, so we'll zoom out with the arrow along the top. First things first, I prefer to change my material size to the size of cardstock that I'll be using. In this case, it will be A4 card. To do that, click on the page setup panel, which is this top one here, and I already had it open. Then under media size, you can change that to whatever size card you'll be using. So I'll be using A4. I just find that helps me visualize the sizes a little bit easier. The very bottom layer on this heart is white, and you can't really see it because of the white background. To make it easier, you can drag a box around everything, and then over on the top left, you've got a little red box. Click into there, and then choose black, and that will give you a black outline around all of the layers. It just makes it a little bit easier to see what you're working with. Don't worry, that's not going to affect how it cuts out. If you want to change the colour of any of the pieces, you can click on them and then click into the colour box up here on the very top left and change the colour from within there. But I'm going to keep mine as it is on the original. If you want to resize, drag a box around everything and then right click and group. Then you see you've got the width and the height along the top. Make sure the padlock icon is closed, which means that it will resize everything in proportion. If your padlock is open, you can click it to close it. So for example, if I typed 6 inches into the width and pressed enter on my keyboard, the height also changes so that everything stays looking beautiful. However, just for this tutorial, I'm going to cut it at the original size, so I'll click undo until that's back at the 4 inches wide. To get this ready to cut, I need to separate out the different colours because we'll be cutting one colour at a time. I'll also show you a way that you could cut all the colours out at the same time for if you prefer that. For a simple design like this, that probably would be a quicker option. However, it does rely on all of your cardstock being the same thickness for all the different colours because you'd be cutting it at the same time, so you can only use one cut setting. The benefit of doing it one colour at a time and sending the mat into your machine once for each colour means that if you need to change the pressure for each of the colours, you can do that. If I was going to be cutting this all on one mat, what I would do would be to change the media size to 12 by 12, and then because I grouped it, I need to right click and ungroup so that I can move the layers about. Then I would do something like this, where I'm moving all of the colours to different corners of the mat. Make sure that nothing overlaps. Then what I could do is take my cutting mat and cut a square of red card and stick it over the mat to cover this space, a square of pink to go over here, and a square of white to go over here. So my cutting mat would end up with those 3 colours of card on it, and I could cut everything in one go. As I tend to use different brands of cardstock with different thicknesses, I don't tend to cut things out this way, as I find personally it's a little bit more tricky. So I'm going to drag these off to the side and just cut the white. Only things that show on your cutting mat are actually going to cut out, so I'm happy to just leave that as it is. I've already got my Cameo 5 plugged in and turned on, and I've connected it to my computer using a USB cable because the Bluetooth on my computer is terrible and very often doesn't work, so I find it easier with a USB cable, but of course it's completely up to you how you connect your machine to your computer. Let's get the cutting mat all ready. So I've got my standard grip mat here. You could also use a light grip mat. Take off the protective cover, and then for the white I am actually going to use a scrap of card left over from another project. So I'm going to line this up along here so it's going up where the 1 and the 1 meet each other. It's a bit hard to see on a transparent mat. You can kind of see there. If you've got a brayer tool or similar, this is really helpful to make sure your mat is really well stuck to that cardstock, or the other way around, the cardstock is very well stuck to the mat. If you don't have one, a rolling pin from the kitchen could work, or you can use a scraper tool. Scraper tools are also really useful for getting any leftover bits of card off of your mat. On looking at this compared to my computer screen, I actually don't think that's a very good way around to do it, because my heart shape is 4 inches wide. So I'm not sure that's going to fit. Instead, I'm going to put my bit of card this way around. There we go. You'll notice that I turned my mat upside down to take the cardstock off. I'll talk a little bit more about that once we've cut this out. Alright, so I'm going to get my machine in place and then head back to Silhouette Studio to start the cut process. First up, I'm going to check all my settings. So my machine is set to Cameo 5, feed type is auto, cutting mat is Cameo 12x12, media size, I've got it set as 12x12. I might just change it to A4 because I'll need that for the other colours, but as long as your white rectangle is bigger than the shape, you're good to go. If you want to double check a little bit easier that you have got enough cardstock on your mat to be covering the whole shape, if you're using scraps like I am, you can go into the grid tool here and then press show grid, and then you can work it out a little bit easier by counting the number of squares and making sure you've got enough card on there. Alright, so let's press send over on the top right, and then this is showing me what it's going to cut out. It will be this heart here. For the material, I'll choose cardstock, textured and heavy. My card isn't actually textured, but it is definitely on the thicker side. My blade depth is up at 7. I think that's a custom setting I've done before. If you want to change it, you can press the arrows here. If you're new to your silhouette and new to cardstock, it might take a few goes before you get everything set up right. I do find it a little bit more difficult to get the settings right on the silhouette than with the Cricut machine, but I think a lot of that is because I've been using the Cricut machine for years and years, and I'm very new to the silhouette machine, so this is all a little bit new to me. But you can play about with the force. The higher the number, the more force it's going to put into the cut, so you could lower it down if you want it to be a little bit less on your cardstock. Passes is the number of time it will cut the same shape, so if you increase that to 2, it would cut the outline of this heart twice. That's helpful for if it's not cutting through the cardstock with all the other settings, so you can try doing it twice and see if that helps too. I don't need anything on carriage 2, that's the other holder in the machine. I only want the carriage 1, which is the one with the blade in. I'm going to move this down a little bit. I can't move it to the right because then it won't fit on my card. Actually, no, the other way around, because I moved the card around. I can move it to the right, I can't move it down. The reason for that is that on Silhouette machines you can do a test cut where it will cut a little shape over on the top left just to check that it's going to go through the cardstock. Alright, I need to load my mat in, so I'm going to do that next. Push and hold the up arrow. Now that's flashing. You can put this in and hold it against the wheels. Wait a few seconds and it will pull it in. You heard it make that little noise as it pulled it in. I'm not going to change anything else on here. I'm just going to go back to my screen and hit the send button. Alright, first let's hit the test. It's making this noise because it's getting the blade ready. That's why it was doing those clicky noises. And then it's done a test on there. So to see if it's cut through, let's eject the mat by hitting the down arrow down here. And then you can hopefully see, I'm not sure, it's cut a little square with a triangle out. And if I just peel up that corner, I can see that hasn't cut through all the way. So I need to adjust my settings. It's much easier to do this little test than to cut the whole thing and then realise it hasn't worked. So press and hold up again, reload the mat. Then in Silhouette Studio, I'm going to up the blade depth a little bit and also change it to do 2 passes, so it will cut my heart out twice. Rather than test it again, because it will test it on that same spot, I haven't quite worked out how to change it yet, but I'm sure you can. I'm just going to go straight ahead and press send and see what happens. On this screen, I've already done all that, so let's go send. That's now finished, so I can hit the down arrow on the bottom left to take the mat out. And let's see if those settings were good enough. If I peel the edge away, oh yeah, perfect, there we go. Alright, so we'll move this, there we go. And now I can load up my next colour. When you're taking your cardstock off of your cutting mat, rather than pulling it off like this, which will kind of bend and roll the card, you can see that's already not lying flat. Instead, turn your mat upside down, gently start bending it backwards, and then use your hand to hold your cardstock, especially the bit you've cut, flat against your work surface. So we're pulling the mat off the cardstock rather than pulling the cardstock off the mat. And there is my heart. Time for the next colour, and I will do the red next. I've got a new sheet of card this time, so it'll be a little bit easier to line up. I'm going to add that to my top left. Brayer it down. There we go. And then head back to Silhouette Studio to get the next colour ready. I'm back in Silhouette Studio. I'm going to go back to Design over on the top left, and then for my white heart, as I've now already cut this out, I'll move it over to the right. When I'm doing multiple colours with the silhouette, I tend to use the left side as ones that still need to be cut, and the right side for ones that have already been cut. The next, we'll do the red. Let's move that over. If you find that this is kind of snapping into place and you can't move it exactly where you want, go back to the page setup along here and the grid option, which is the second one, and turn off snap to grid and snap to guides. You may also want to turn off enable smart snapping, but mine isn't on, and now I can move it much more freely. Make sure nothing overlaps like that, otherwise it's not going to cut out properly. We need to make sure they are nice and separate. There we go. That's my two red pieces, so I can press send again. And now it's got these two outlined, so it's going to cut me these two, which is exactly what I want to do. I've still got those same settings. It's remembered what I had for the white cardstock. I think that'll work well for this one too, so I'm not going to change anything. Just load my mat and then get it cut. Here's my mat. Once again, I'll push that up. Now that's flashing. Put that in against the little wheels and hold it until it brings it in. I always have that slight moment of, is it going to work? But it always seems to. So now that's loaded in, I can go back to the screen. I'm not going to do a test cut this time because I'm pretty happy with how I cut the white, so I think it should be the same for the red. I am now using textured cardstock, but it's about the same thickness as the white, so I'm just going to go for it. Press send. I've already loaded all of that, so send again. That's all cut out, so hit the down to get the mat, and then that has cut beautifully. You can see that coming off. There's my little heart. I'll do the same thing again of turning my mat upside down and holding the cardstock flat on my surface and peeling the mat away. There we go. Then all my cardstock stays perfectly flat and lovely, so I can use the rest of it for another project another time. And here are my two red hearts. I'm going to do the same thing again, but off camera for my remaining pink heart. It's exactly the same as you've just seen me do. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll see how to stick together our lovely little heart. Now that I've got all of the pieces of my heart cut out, it's time to stick them together. I like to use a combination of glue and foam squares so that I can give my paper crafts some dimension. With all of my paper crafts, if you look in the download folder that you originally got from my website, there is a file in there called Assembly Guide. Open that up and that will show you the order that all of the layers go in and whether I recommend sticking each one with glue or foam squares. If you don't have any foam squares, you can just use glue and it will still end up a beautiful papercraft project. What I like to do before I start sticking is to put everything in order following that assembly guide. You can print out the assembly guide if you want so that you've got it with you while you're crafting. This one's pretty simple, it's only 4 pieces, so I can manage that one from memory. And there it is, so that's how it'll look when it's all put together. The reason I like putting all the layers on top of each other first is that I can check I've not accidentally lost anything along the way, and also that I'm just happy with how all the colours look when they're on top of one another. Because sometimes colours look great when they're next to each other, but when you actually start stacking them, you might notice that maybe there's not as much contrast or difference as you wanted, or maybe some of the tones don't go together very well. But that is all looking lovely. Any type of glue that you would usually use with your papercraft projects is fine. My current favourite glue is Bearly Art Glue, and I like this because it has a very thin nozzle on it, so the glue comes out really, really slowly, and it comes with a needle to put in so it doesn't dry out. This is a white glue, so it doesn't have a smell to it, it's nice and quick to dry, and it doesn't bend or wrinkle the cardstock like some wet glues can do. For similar reasons, I also like Collall. This also doesn't bend or wrinkle the cardstock, but for this one, it comes with quite a big nozzle, so you'd probably want to buy some needle tip applicator bottles, which are tiny little bottles with little nozzles on to put the glue into, to make sure you can get it into all the little areas of your project without kind of spilling it or putting too much on. Collall is a solvent glue, so it does have a little bit of a smell to it, so bear that in mind, especially if you are sensitive to solvent products. Another glue I also quite like, but I don't use as much, is this Nuvo glue from Tonic Studios. These have a nice thin nozzle to them too, and it doesn't bend or wrinkle the card as long as you only use a little bit of it. If you use loads, it can have that wrinkling effect, which is why this one is third in my favourites. And also sometimes I found that they get a little bit clogged and hard to use, but generally this is still a great glue. I live in the UK and I get all of these glues online. Bearly Art Glue and Collall I buy on Amazon, and the Nuvo glue I buy direct from Tonic Studios. If you don't have any of those glues, that's absolutely fine, just use what you've got. The foam squares I like to use are from Dot & Dab. Again, I get these on Amazon. They come in different sizes, and these ones you can see are quite small. It tells you the size here. These are 5 by 5 millimeters, and these ones are double, so they're 10. So you can choose which one you use based on the size of the card that you're making. If you've only got larger foam squares, you can cut them smaller with scissors. These ones are both white, but you can also buy black foam squares, which can help if you're doing a darker papercraft project with lots of dark coloured layers, so that you can't see the edges of the foam when you turn the papercraft around. But generally, I don't really find that's a problem, even if I use the light ones on a black papercraft. You don't normally see them poking through unless you're looking really, really, really hard at it, which I don't think you would be that likely to do. With all of my papercraft projects, you'll start at the bottom and then work your way upwards. I'm going to move these pieces apart again and then start with this one. So if you look at the assembly guide, you'll see for this one, this is a glue layer. So I turn it around, so this is upside down, and add my glue. You want a good amount on here to make sure it'll be well stuck. And then put it in the middle of the frilly bit. And it's a bit hard to see because it's white card on a white table. Just wiggling that around to get it in the middle. There we go. If I put my hands under, you can see a little easier. And then for this design, that's the only glue one. So I'll add the needle tip back in my glue, put that to one side, and then get some foam squares for the rest. Next up is the pink heart, which will be done with the foam squares. So I turn it upside down and add some foam. Now this is quite a small piece of card, so I can get away with just 3 pieces. If your piece is bigger, you'll need more. If you have got a large piece, for example something about this size, then you would want to add some foam squares in the middle as well as around the edge to make sure that you've got good stability across the whole shape for when you stick it on. If you don't add anything in the middle, you might find your card kind of bends downwards, domes downwards like that, where it's got nothing to support it. So adding a few extra foam squares in the middle really does make a difference on those larger bits of card. But this one's tiny, so 3 is just fine. Peel the tops off and then you'll find that these are sticky underneath. You might want to keep a little pot or dish handy to get all of those little squares in, otherwise they tend to go everywhere. And then line that up just roughly in the middle, as close as you can get it, and push down to stick. And I got 1 little heart left. This is even smaller. I'll go for 2 bits of foam this time. And again, put that in the middle. And that's my heart done. So now you have your first ever paper craft cut with your Silhouette machine. Isn't it cute? You could now use this on a greetings card, you could frame it, you could put it in a scrapbook, you could punch a hole in it and use it as a gift tag, add a magnet on the back and put it on your refrigerator. There are so many different possibilities. And now you've learned how to cut cardstock with your Silhouette, there will be no stopping you with your paper craft projects. If you'd like to progress to more complex layered designs, such as this fairy door project that has more pieces and more colours, but you're not quite sure how to go from this to this, head to craftwithsarah.com/help. Choose Silhouette from the list of machine options and then look for the tutorial on how to cut layered cardstock projects with a Silhouette machine. In that video, I'll walk you through making this fairy door design, but the steps will be the same for any of the 1000 plus layered designs available at craftwithsarah.com. And of course, there's over 100 free designs at craftwithsarah.com/free-SVGs. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed seeing how to cut cardstock with your Silhouette machine. If you have, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for lots more Silhouette machine and cardstock craft projects. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!